I have loved being an ally, but about 12 years ago, something changed, and I had the opportunity to run my own company, and I decided I wanted to escalate. So today, I consider myself an accomplice. First, a little bit about me. I'm the first of 4 children born in an interfaith, interclass marriage. It was Jewish working class and Baptist 1%er. It was not actually illegal for my parents to get married in Georgia when they did in 1963, but it was supremely frowned upon by their families. And they ultimately fled the South for Montana, where I was raised. Now, we're all white in my family, so it was pretty easy to disappear into Montana, and I think that privilege needs to be noted. But their love and their shared values of humility and integrity and human equality were really kind of my homegrown church that my siblings and I grew up with. So today, a number of years later, I'm a journalist who became an entrepreneur. Now, I started work in the 1990s, not the 1890s, but I was still, because I was a hard news, business, transportation, city hall, and public policy reporter, I was still very shocked to find myself the first woman to cover those topics on most of the news desks I worked on. And since then, it wasn't until I started my own company, and even after that, that I regularly stood in those newsrooms and in conference rooms and in boardrooms with male colleagues and or bosses and or potential partners and or potential investors, armed with reams of data and real experiences, and was told essentially that I didn't exist, that women didn't matter, that women would never embrace technology or go online in large numbers, that women would never blog or use anything social in large numbers. And obviously, by inference, I was also told, they weren't biased because I was on the team or in the room, wasn't I? And I thought, well, yes, there is a lot here that is obvious to me. It was evident to me from who else was not in the room that if I had not been a white woman, arguably this kind of straight, white, cis woman, that I would not have been there at all. And it was evident from these conversations that they were not about the data or experience. These conversations were completely and purely emotional. They also had a lot to do with bias. And it was very helpful, given who I am, to experience that directed at me. So I evolved into what Cindy calls an ally because I was just done. I was sick and tired of the hypocrisy. I was done being part of the problem. I wanted to do things differently. So I decided that in the organizations that I led, that I would find the best talent to run the best businesses with the most unbelievable content. Because for the past 30 years, I've been running and building businesses and marketing strategies that are very content and curriculum rich, every kind of content. And when I found those other people who said, the other people I said existed didn't exist, I would shine a spotlight so goddamn hard on these people that it was irrefutable. And I would take the data and I would track the experience and I would say, there's no denying this. I have the server data and I have the gorgeous story. And here is this woman. Here is this woman. I'm a little gendered in my history. So what was interesting was, as I worked methodically, I found that the very first thing I had to do was protect what I did from my own bias. I was just one woman with one limited set of experience. I needed to be absolutely religious about my approach to avoiding pulling that unconscious bias into everything that I did. So I found that I was working to find the most diverse teams, the most diverse group of freelancers, the most unusual set of every kind of visual or video or contributor. And it really became a practice of radical inclusivity. And it is the reason that time after time, I've been able to build these massive communities of 25 to 100 million women a month, from women.com to BlogHer, because no one woman can do anything. It takes a massive community of people who are aligned together toward exploding the concept that, in the case of my companies, women do just one thing, or look like just one thing, or feel like just one thing, right? Early in the days, one of our community members called us the fairy godmother mafia. And that has really stuck with me. Jerry Houston from Fresno. She actually started a cool little company called Fresno Famous that was written up in the Wall Street Journal and promptly purchased Early Entrepreneur. And I think that that model of the fairy god gender mafia, insert gender, is a process that is the only way to move forward as not just an ally, but also an accomplice. So I wanted to share with you, and I'll be quick, at Cindy's request, what has helped me catch myself, teach myself, and learn from the people who every second, because they were generous with their time, their attention, and their truth, made me so much smarter and these businesses so much better. So here are just 5 quick questions that I've used to sort of guide myself, learn with my teams. Number 1, how radical is my definition of inclusivity and diversity, right? Of course, gender. Of course, race and ethnicity. Of course, gender preference. But what about neurodiversity? What about ability? What about age? What about all the wonderful things you all have talked here today? And I really want to compliment Breaking Glass because I think the conversation has been very respectful of that. It's really interesting to fight those assumptions and what they mean. Do I show enough interpersonal respect? My father who's 6'5", has never been in a room where he didn't stand up when someone new came in the door. This is someone who was massively disrespected by most members of my mother's family. And the way he met that was to out Clark Gable and out gracious everyone who walked into the room. One of the interesting things is that the higher you raise in an organization by title and by all those culturally valued issues, the more important it is that you not play to your title or play to your rank in the organization, but actually play as horizontally as possible and as respectfully as possible to everyone else in the room. Because it turns out, if you stand up and shake hands and smile and say good morning, everyone else will. I know people in the United States who have never met or shaken the hand of someone who is not their same race. I've reported all over the United States. I've been all over different neighborhoods. And to be the first person that shakes the hand of someone who's never met someone like you is a pretty fantastic opportunity to blow their minds. I think that what's challenging about that is sometimes we just want to live. Sometimes we just want to go to work. Sometimes we don't want to be the ambassador, the emissary of all Palo Alto suburban moms who have an interesting family life, or all the things that you are. And I think that that's where the beauty of listening comes in, to your point. Because sometimes just listening has been so important for me because it is sadly so rare for, I think, a number of people who look like me to hand over the microphone and sit down and just seriously listen. And so that is something that I think is the first step in leadership, and I think also in the workplace. Here's an interesting story. When I went to work at women.com, it was 1998, and I inherited a team from another editor. And I found that in the meetings, there were 2 women who never spoke. Literally, they never spoke. I would ask everyone's opinion, and they would act like I hadn't even spoken with them. But I shared a cue ball with them. The ideas and the humor that came over that cue wall, and I finally whipped around the wall, and I was like, I'm done. I'm done with you hiding your brilliance from me. I'm actually insulted. I would like to know why you're not talking in the meetings. Is it what I wear? I'm not as cool as you. What's happening? And they're like, we were told not to talk in the meetings. You were told not to talk in the meetings. By whom? Well, we're the newest members of the team. And we were told that everyone with our title, editorial assistant, was not supposed to participate in the meetings because we're there to learn. I was like, that's over now. And if you don't speak up, quiet corner, I will start calling on you. I had no idea that there was an institutional ceiling on their ability to contribute because I did not understand the actual very deliberate ways in which they'd been told to shut up. Think of all the unspoken put-downs that we've talked about today. And what's ironic is that the very best, biggest hits that we ever came out with as a team that showed up on Oprah and the Today Show came from those two women. So quickly, 4 and 5. Question number 4. Have I developed a process that extends my values of inclusivity into my work so that it happens even when I'm not in the room? I think that the most important thing we did at BlogHer was that we decided that since we weren't going to be hypocrites and we weren't going to make sure that we reinvented the 3 mostly white chicks talking at every single conference we ran ad infinitum, was to figure out a way to force ourselves to change it. And we were like, okay, we want to turn over the number of speakers that we have, the new speakers, by 85% every year. We're not giving up on our proven moderators because they're really hard to find. But we want new speakers. And community, we're telling you this goal, and we want you to tell us what's hot and cool. So here's the community submission timeframe. And then we're going to roll them out to y'all and have you tell us what you love the most, right? And so if there are people who want to ballot box stuff, bring it. We just want to know. Because we had no illusion that we were going to be able to be reflective of the insane fabulousness of our community. I mean, this is a community that brought us feminist hip-hop blogging, mommy blogging, and, you know, how to write pro code in our geek lab. It was incredible. I think that I can't tell you how critically important it was to our success. And what's ironic is the degree it built our credibility to the point that we were able to have deeper and deeper and more difficult and dangerous conversations. For example, in 2009, Heather Barmore suggested and led a panel on women of color and marketing. Now, at the time, for those of you who are bloggers, it was almost impossible to get Fortune 1000 companies to take seriously the fact that African American, Asian American, Latina, Pacific Islander, Native American women here in the United States were a growing force online. So we gave these women a forum, and it was Heather Barmore, Kelly Wickham, Karen Walren from Chukalunks, and Stefania Pomponi, who does Clever Girls here. And boy, they let them have it. It was a beautiful dissertation on the extreme huge value of their communities and what they could accomplish within 4 brands. And then they gave a zinger to the community. All 3 black women on that panel at some point had been called Heather. You recall me saying that their names were Heather, Kelly, and Karen? Recall they looked as much alike as like me, you, and you? I mean, like, no. And they were able to give it to the audience and the community of BlogHer at the same time that they were able to say their piece to marketers. And it was heard. And from that point, we were every year able to have an increasingly difficult and beautiful conversation about inclusivity and intersectionality and diversity. And it changed our community massively. When I say that I want to be an accomplice, it's partially because being an ally isn't enough for me, because it's much more important to me to figure out how to use myself, my connections, and create agency for voices that aren't going to get up there otherwise. But also, let's be clear, these incredible giving community built everything that I was trying to stand for. I owe at the Bank of Karma. It's time to give back. When you disagree, do you speak your truth? Stacy's last point. And the answer is, there is no other option. Look, today, the number of times we see a panel that has only one kind of person on it representing technology. Not okay, right? Not okay to only interview one kind of person. Not okay to hire only one kind of person. And I don't respect it. So I would just offer up to folks in the room who are not straight, white, cis, whatever box you want to check. The question is, have you developed the relationships at work you need where you will be heard when you have that question? Because if an institution has developed that kind of a challenge, it's actually not just on you, right? It takes a mafia. Have you decided which battles to fight or whether to take them all on? This was the question Stacy asked. It's so important. And the question is, once you've made that decision, how can you get tactical with the people you know, with your larger mafia? And then finally, how are you balancing your decision to participate in an economy where so much wealth is being created, and yet you are also really having to lead cultural change? Because we all know that it's the right thing to do. But what these companies are learning is that it's also the best way to win. They have no option. So it's a huge opportunity. It's an exhausting opportunity. It's a burden, but it's also your calling to leadership. And so I guess I would just say, I recently got a chance to hear Melody Hobson, who is the president of Ariel Investments, and she was like, look, unconscious bias is our lives. Be color brave. Yes. Don't be colorblind. And she, I think I'd like to give the last word to. Thank you for listening.